It's time once again for the BCM Game of the Month, and this is the game for August 2014. Hello, I'm Andrew Martin. The start of August is marked by the beginning of the Chess Olympiad in Tromso, and of course there are a whole raft of interesting games from the early rounds, as the top players in the world in general go up with players who are rated way beneath them, but of course who are capable of giving them an excellent game. One interesting game caught my eye in round 2 between Kramnik playing white and Modiakhi, a strong grandmaster graded 2-5-4-9. And in this game Modiakhi employs a rare variation of the King's Indian, but one which perhaps should be given more attention. Now Kramnik starts off in classical style with bishop e2, black responds with e5, and white castles, inviting black to a theoretical duel in one of the main lines after knight c6, d5. Modiakhi goes his own way here and plays queen e8. Now, in this particular position, this is quite a rare move. It's a flexible move. Black protects e5. He notes that any attacks on c7 can be easily met with knight to a6. And later on, once black plays f5, which is one of the main ideas in this position, then the queen will be quite well placed, as she can often slide out to the king side. I know that seems unlikely at the moment, but once black has played f5, this manoeuvre comes into focus. What is white to do? Well, his most popular moves are the one Kramnik played, d takes e5. He can push on in the centre with d5, or he can play rook e1. Now rook e1 looks quite logical here, putting the rook on the same file as the queen, but in this instance I think black can take on d4 and then take on e4. This bold move I think gives black a good position, and is one of the reasons why rook e1 isn't more popular as a response. For instance, if knight d5, we just go knight a6, and if bishop f3, which looks very strong, then black can get away with a bold f5. If we go back to rook e1, we take on d4 again. Let's see this one more time. Can white play bishop f3 immediately? Well, of course, black can play f5 here, but he can even play knight takes c3 in this position, noting that both queens are attacked. If b takes c3, queen d8, this is very unclear. Black's a pawn up, but white's got a good deal of freedom and superior development. At any rate, it doesn't look as though rook e1 is a serious challenge to queen e8. Now d5 has been played quite frequently, and it was seen in one of the most recent examples of queen e8, the game between Bakos and Kaba, which was played in Hungary 2014. These players are graded around 2400, and in that game black played knight fd7. I mean, of course black doesn't need to do that, but it's thematic, and black is thinking about f5. He's got to be a bit careful about f5 straight away, because as is known in the King's Indian, white can sometimes slip in a quick knight g5, leaving the e6 square rather tender. So that's why, going back, black decided to play h6 first, white went b4, and now black hit on the queen side with a5, showing that this move queen e8 is not one-dimensional. After b takes a5, f5, white played a4 with unclear consequences and went on to win. But I think actually quite interesting, if we back up, is simply the positional knight c5. Just delaying f5 for the time being and putting the knight on a good square, enabling the queenside pieces to come out. To me it looks as though black has got quite a playable position here, with the queen on e8 ready to spring out once he's played f5. So going back, Kramnik, perhaps slightly surprised by Modiakhi's choice, and I'm sure that was the reason he played queen e8, decided to stick with d takes e5. And at first sight it doesn't look as though this is going to be particularly dangerous. But Kramnik now played b4. The general advance on the queen side begins, and perhaps white is thinking about moves like b5 and then bishop a3. Of course, one of the drawbacks of putting the queen on e8 is that the rook on f8 is blocked in for the time being. So b4 is pretty logical here. Just dropping back, bishop e3 has also been favoured. And then black can choose between b6, or he can play knight bd7 here. Both of these moves have been played by Sedlak, Grandmaster Sedlak, who has got pretty good results with this variation. Okay, all that is for the future. In our game, Kramnik played b4. And now Modiakhi, seeing white's plan unfolding, played his queen to e7. This might look like a loss of time, but of course he's induced white into taking on e5 early. Now when you see the future course of this game, you will feel that black should have developed his queen side earlier. So can I suggest bishop g4 as a very reasonable alternative for black? Obviously black intends to try to conquer d4, to take on f3, knight c6, knight d4, so white had better stop that plan. Now black takes on f3, and with bishop a3 coming up, he's got to move his queen, queen e6. White goes knight d5, and now black plays rook c8. All this has been seen in quite a few games, with white struggling to prove a definite advantage. If white goes bishop a3 here, then black can defend with bishop f8. Very thematic, offering the exchange of his bad bishop. And just backing up, if white goes bishop e3, centralising, then black can just play knight bd7, with perhaps c6 coming up. So it seems to me that bishop g4 gives black a pretty solid position here. And Modiakhi played queen e7, and white pushed on with b5. Now came a6. So you can see this variation is very original. It has given a different twist to the main line of the King's Indian, and both players are thrown on their own resources. Of course, that's very dangerous when you're playing against Kramnik. But Al Modiakhi obviously wanted to take most of the main theoretical lines out of the equation. Now, clearly, c6 is also a move here. And white should probably respond with a4. Although he can also go queen b3, of course. If a4, then perhaps rook d8, queen c2, and now again this move bishop g4. I think in this line, unloading this bishop is quite a good idea for black. And after bishop e3, queen e8, there's no rook on f8 anymore, so white presses on the queen side. Now black takes on f3 and goes bishop f8. Again with a solid position which is quite difficult to crack. Black will argue that his knights, either of his knights, are superior to this light squared bishop. But in the game, going back, Al Modiakhi jabs at white's pawn advance with a6. White goes a4, and now black takes on b5 straight away, releasing the tension to an extent. He could have kept the game tense on the queen side, preferring knight bd7, and after bishop a3, he can even step into a pin with knight c5. Although this looks risky, it's quite difficult for white to take advantage of the pin. I mean, he can try and manoeuvre his queen to e3 to take advantage of the pin. Black goes rook d8, rook d1, and then quite solid for black is rook takes d1 check, rook takes d1, and now either of bishop f8 or bishop b7. By pushing his pawns on the queen side, white has made some committal pawn advances. And although white can put his knight into d5, again, black remains quite solid. In the game, Al Modiakhi makes the committal decision to open up the queen side. C takes b5, rook d8, and white puts his queen on the c file. Now there are definite ideas of pressurising black on c7. Al Modiakhi seems unconcerned. He plays knight bd7. Once again, this was an opportunity to play bishop g4. This is a recurring theme in this game. And if white has nothing better than to push forward with a5, then I think probably, again, black is okay here. Black can consider c6. And unclear play results after a6. B takes a6 and now b6. This position, on the face of it, seems better for white. For instance, he sacks a pawn to get his pieces into very good positions. But black is quite solid. And by manoeuvring the knight into b4, he's making life difficult for white. Let's go back to the game. Modiakhi plays knight bd7. Kramnik goes bishop a3. That's the point of all this advance on the queen side. Queen e8, and now rook fd1. So the failure to play bishop g4 and ungun the queen side has probably led black into a disadvantage, and I would say white now holds the upper hand. Although it shouldn't be as bad as it was made out to be in the game. I think that's the best way to put it. So black tries to get rid of his dark squared bishop, which is his bad bishop. Kramnik obliges, and now black has to make another interesting choice. He took with the knight in the game. The knight makes sense when we consider black's plan of bishop g4, bishop takes f3, and then the manoeuvre of this knight on f8 to d4. In we go. White must not allow that to happen. Black could also have taken with the queen, and after bishop c4, intending knight g5, he could just play queen e7, so that knight g5 will be answered by rook f8. If white pushes forward, we go king g7. If he pushes forward again, then knight b6. And once again, it's not easy to take advantage of white's spatial edge. If white takes on d8 and plays bishop e2, then queen d6, and again, black is asking white, what exactly do you have here? So you can see at many points during the opening and early middle game here, Modiakhi had other choices to ones that he made. Perhaps the tension of playing Kramnik was actually quite great. So he allows white to take a pawn, and now he moves in with queen d4. Black sacks a pawn deliberately in order to get his queen into a dominant position. And now there are ideas of knight takes e4 in the position. So Kramnik moves his queen. Knight g4. Tempting, but white could easily defend himself against this attack. Once again, was it time for bishop g4? Of course, the position has changed somewhat in that white is a pawn up here. So you'd think after a move like knight d5, he would be clearly better. But even here, it's not so easy. Black can play queen d6. White can exchange off all the pieces. But he finds himself with this very lame light square bishop on e2. And black has targets on e4 and a4 to aim at. Yes, I know c7's on pre. But let's see. h3, we take on f3, we take on a4. He takes on c7, we take on e4. He takes on b7. And then black has some drawing chances here after rook a1 check, king h2, and now knight d2. White's clearly better, of course, but black can harass white with moves like rook e1. It probably is winning for white, but not at all easy. Well, going back, knight g4 was answered by knight d1, just protecting f2. Black brought his knight out to d7. Of course, what Modiakhi is relying on is control of the dark squares to give him compensation for the pawn. White played rook c1, black played queen to b6. White went knight to d2, black put his knight in on c5. This is probably the culmination of the pawn sacrifice. White went knight c4, and unfortunately this prompted a losing mistake. Well, he's playing the great Kramnik. He's under fire, he's a pawn down. Perhaps the pawn sacrifice hasn't worked. He knows this in his own mind. He blunders with queen f6. What should he do? Well, maybe he should play queen e6 here. White pushes on and then just go queen e7. Re-establishing the connectivity of his pieces. But, of course, he's still a pawn down. White can maybe play knight de3. Black can chop this off and regain his pawn. In comes the knight to d5. Queen g5 with some vague threats on the king side. Knight takes c7. And now knight e8. This looks nice for white, and he's still a pawn up. But in the game, the pressure told. Queen f6. Oh dear, bishop takes g4. You wouldn't believe a grandmaster can make such a mistake, but when you're playing somebody really strong, you know, there's a lot of mental pressure on you to continue to find good moves, because you know the guy sitting opposite you is going to do just that. So unfortunately, black blunders, bishop takes g4, and there's nothing left other than to resign. So a brief game, but actually quite interesting for many reasons. not the least of which was the opening of that game, where after castles, queen e8 actually looks like a decent alternative to the mainline moves.